My name is Daniel Reyes. I'm a 32-year-old former Army intelligence officer, recently retired after 12 years of service. I came back home to take care of my mother, Maria, who's been wheelchair-bound since a stroke last year. She raised me alone, working 2 jobs, sacrificing everything to give me a better life. So when she called me in tears about being kicked out of the park by some HOA official, I flew back that very night. Mom lives in a quiet, tree-lined subdivision in Virginia called Briar Glen. Picture perfect on the surface. But beneath, its manicured lawns and carefully painted picket fences was a beast of bureaucracy and power-drunk HOA board members. Mom's house, which she's lived in for over 25 years, is one of the original properties in the neighborhood. She paid it off long ago. But when I got home and asked her what happened, she said something that made my blood boil. They said my wheelchair was a nuisance and that the park is for walking residents only. They told me to leave, Danny. Like I didn't belong there. I clenched my fists. Who told you that? A man named Clark. He's on the HOA board. Oh, Clark. I'd soon learn a lot about him. The next morning, I drove Mom to the local HOA office. She was nervous, but I reassured her. We're not asking for anything. We're demanding respect. The office sat in a building next to the clubhouse. Inside was a receptionist and 2 smug-looking board members. One of them stood up as we entered. "You can't just come in here," he said, half laughing. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said. "But you kicked my mother out of a public access park that her property taxes help pay for. I think we can skip the formalities." The man leaned forward. "This is private property. The HOA maintains the park, and we have rules. Wheelchairs aren't considered." I stepped forward. "If you finish that sentence, I swear I'll file an ADA complaint so fast your fax machine will explode." His face paled. The receptionist was already looking up the number for legal counsel, but instead of getting into a shouting match, I said, "I'll be back with paperwork." "You've messed with the wrong woman. You don't spend over a decade in military intelligence without picking up a few things." Within 3 days, I had a full file on the Briar Glen HOA. Their financials were suspect, their meeting minutes were vague or missing, and the board members, all 5, had extended their terms illegally by never holding elections. That alone was grounds for a legal challenge. Even better? The HOA's bylaws were written in the early 90s and hadn't been updated, meaning the ADA wasn't properly incorporated and their "no wheels in the park" rule entirely illegal. But I didn't just want to sue them. I wanted to own them. HOAs, like any small regime, work on votes and apathy. Most residents don't participate, so I started knocking on doors, met neighbors, explained what had happened to Mom, and showed them the paperwork. The community was outraged. Many had their own horror stories. One man was fined $250 for hanging a wreath before December 1st. Another woman's granddaughter was told she couldn't play hopscotch on the sidewalk. After 2 weeks of work and 51 signed petitions, I called for a special election of the board, as allowed under Article 7 of the HOA bylaws. They tried to block me, so I lawyered up. I had everything on my side: law, support, and press interest. When a local journalist covered the story of how the HOA harassed a disabled woman out of a park, the floodgates opened. The board folded, and guess who the community voted in as the new HOA president? At the next HOA meeting, I took my seat at the center table. The room was packed, standing room only. My mom sat front row, smiling with pride. Clark, the man who had humiliated her, was in the back, glaring at me. He hadn't even shown up to the election, too embarrassed or too arrogant to believe he could lose. I opened the meeting with one statement. "As your new HOA president, I want to make one thing clear. This community will no longer be run by fear, fines, and outdated rules. We will lead with compassion, legality, and transparency." Applause erupted. Then I held up a folder. "These are the ADA compliance updates we're making. Starting today, our park will be accessible, and anyone who tries to block a resident's access based on disability will face not only fines, but immediate removal from their position." Clark stood up and stormed out. No one followed him. With the power shift complete, I didn't stop at the park. I brought in a third-party auditor and revealed the HOA board had misused nearly $40,000 of community funds on reimbursements and travel expenses. Clark was forced to return $200 personally. His property value tanked. The HOA bylaws were rewritten, adding in not just ADA protections, but new community vote provisions that made it easier for residents to challenge decisions. And Mom, I had a special surprise for her. I used some of the returned funds, legally reallocated with community vote, to install a wheelchair-accessible garden path and seating area in the park, dedicated in her name. There wasn't a dry eye that day. 3 months after the change, a black car pulled into our driveway. A woman stepped out in a crisp gray suit, federal badge on her belt. "Mr. Reyes?" Yes? I'm Agent Willis with the Department of Housing and Urban Development. We've had several complaints filed from your area recently, including one from an individual claiming your takeover of the HOA was unlawful. Clark, had to be. She continued, after reviewing the documentation and evidence, I just wanted to let you know, you're in the clear. In fact, your case may be used as a model in a HUD training course. She smiled. It's rare we get to see a story where the good guys win this cleanly. That evening, I sat with Mom in her new section of the park. The flowers around us were blooming, and her wheelchair rested on the smooth stone path I helped lay myself. You didn't have to do all this, she said softly. I did, I replied. You gave me everything. This is just the start of giving it back. She patted my hand. You always did like justice, even as a boy. I chuckled. Guess I finally found the battlefield where I belong. 6 months later, I was offered a full-time position at a regional HOA management firm, consulting communities on how to clean house and modernize their rules. Turns out, standing up to petty tyrants was more than just a one-time act. It was a calling. But no matter how far I went or how many communities I helped, Briar Glen was home, where I turned pain into power, where a wheelchair wasn't a problem. It was a symbol of strength, and where one man reminded a neighborhood what respect really means.